We are very, very pleased tonight to have Audrey and Catherine Engel give us a history of the legendary Surry Playhouse. And I'd like to turn this over to them. Thank you.
Excuse us, technical difficulties. There we are. Okay. So, not sure I can imbalance everything here. So welcome this evening to our presentation of the Surry Playhouse. We'd like to draw your attention to this drawing of the Playhouse to acknowledge that it was created by the artist Ruth Bellotti Johnson, who summered for many years at Contention Cove. On the, I don't know if John mentioned that the yard sale items, you can still bring some. You can bring them Tuesday between 9:30 and 3, or Thursday between 1 and 7. Okay. So, this photo, which is also on your handout, is Jessie and Abby Ingalls. Jessie and Abby, the photo was taken in 1929, and these two were ushers during the opening season of the Surry Playhouse. I want you to know that Jessie and Abby are my great aunts. As we go through our program tonight, you will see that the Playhouse had an impact on many Surry residents, providing jobs, relationships, memory, and entertainment. Kathy and I will usher you into the past to see how the Playhouse began, how it changed through the years, and why it eventually closed. Kathy, why would anyone want to start a summer playhouse in the small village of Surry?
Well, it seems as though it was a serendipitous encounter between this woman, Constance Purdy, and a play director, Leighton Rollins. Constance Purdy apparently sang with Tsar Nicholas in Russia, and she was a very young girl. She studied voice in Paris when she was 16, and she then embarked on a career as a concert singer, lecturer, and translator of Russian songs. Reportedly, in 1928, she was lecturing at a girls' preparatory school in Wellesley, Massachusetts, and went to a production put on by Leighton Rollins. Also, before I leave this slide, I'd like to point out at the very bottom of this program here, it says that Mabel Hammond was Miss Purdy's personal representative and sometimes pianist. Leighton Rollins had been an assistant manager of the Repertory Theater in Boston. He was on staff at Coburn Theater in New York, and he also gave lecture tours on drama and contemporary literature. He founded and directed the Tryout Theater that was in Wellesley, Massachusetts. Only new plays were produced there, and so that was how it happened that he was in Wellesley in 1928. Purdy was obviously impressed by the production she attended and asked Rollins if he would be interested in starting a summer repertory theater in Surry, Maine, where she owned some land. Would I? He responded. It would be his dream come true. And so the venture began. Of course, this venture required money, and Leighton Rollins went to Surry and the area to search for financial backing for the summer theater. Mrs. Ethelbert Nevin of Blue Hill, who was also the widow of the pianist and the composer, Ethelbert Nevin, became the chairman of the committee of guarantors and helped find many supporters far and wide for the project. young actor and a 1928 graduate of the University of North Carolina named Shepard Starker headed to Surry to oversee the construction of the Surry Playhouse. Surry, Maine would become the site of one of the first summer repertory theaters in the country. People would even come by boat to attend the theater. And very carefully, I know it's kind of hard to see, but right here, there are two masts sticking up above the trees of probably a yacht that came to visit and attend the play of the Surry Theater. Audrey, tell us about the structure of the Surry Playhouse.
Okay, so the Playhouse had a wonderful hand wrought iron sign at the entrance, as shown in this picture. It said the Surry Playhouse, and it was beautifully designed. The barn itself was made of weathered tongue and grooved pine. Need to read these at the same time. It was quickly built with local labor and materials. The theater entrance had a huge fireplace surrounded by comfortable leather chairs. And the belfry held an old ship bell, which was named the Ethelbert Nevin Bell. This bell would be rung when intermission was over to tell the guests that it was time for the performance to resume. There were 300 seats in the theater, so you see it really was quite large. The seats were obtained from the Old Century Theater in New York and donated to the Playhouse by Mrs. Ethelbert Nevins. Okay, here you see an early photo of the Playhouse. And you can see it really is quite barn-like. And let me see. So right here is the big chimney, and you can see down below that it has a really big base. Back here is the belfry, and you can actually see the bell a bit. In the front, there are several automobiles, which were typical of the late 1920s. You might also notice in this picture, compared to some later, that the trees are really quite small. Okay, so Rollins stated in his interview for the Portland Evening Press that the stage curtain would be a trademark of the Surry Theater. He described it as interchangeable silk sewed on a sea green background to resemble a huge wave breaking in all of its foaming glory. So we believe that the stage curtain looked like this, because this drawing was used repeatedly in many of the early playbills. In the original plan, there were 3 units as part of the Surry enterprise. First of all, the Surry Playhouse for the production of plays and the entertainment. Managing director was Leighton Rollins. The second part was the Surry Workshop for teaching aspiring actors and actresses who got to practice their craft in productions with professionals. The executive director here was Miss Eva McAdoo, who was an instructor drummer at the Berkeley School in New York. The third component was the Surry School of Creative Writing, with Grace Conklin as director. Miss Hazard was an instructor at Smith College in Northampton, Mass. This section was actually located at Hamper Farm in Ellsworth, 5 miles away from the Surry Playhouse. The name Hamper Farm came from combining Miss Purdy's name with her personal representative's name, Miss Hammond. A season there, from July 1st to September 1st, cost a student $400. Pretty steep for them. Okay. This sketch was also found in early playbills. It shows the area surrounding the playhouse in different aspects of the Playhouse. So as we look, let's see, you point out there is the Playhouse. This is Mr. Rollins directing. This area here shows the students in the drama school practicing. I don't know why they had to practice outside, but they did. This here, I can't quite read the name, but these two were houses that housed the students and the actors when they were there. Down here you see the landing, and again, there were yachts coming in, and in one of the articles I read referred to the Margaret Todd as bringing in some of the customers, or the theater goers. Let's see, right here, one, it's hard to read the signs and we couldn't completely decipher, but we believe one of those was the Blue Lantern restaurant. Okay. So, Kathy, can you tell us when the Playhouse opened and what play was presented?
Yeah, forgive the blurriness of this slide, but it seems to be the only one that we have a photo of the slide. You have the, sorry. Right here is that beautiful iron wrought sign that says Surry Playhouse. And if anyone happens to know what's ever happened to this and where that sign is, we'd love to have it donated to us. But welcome to Surry Playhouse. Let the plays begin. The first season opened on July 5th, 1929. The first opening play was March Hares by Harry Wagstaff. The next 4 plays were also announced in an interview by Leighton Rollins that these would be some of the plays that were presented in the first season. And the rest of the plays, starting with The Young Idea, The Marriage of St. Francis, and Cricket on the Hearth, were suggested from other sources that had been on the first year. In addition to 8 plays that were presented during the year, there were also Sunday concerts, and the concerts were given by international artists, and there were a series of lectures. And one of the first lectures was by the creative writing director, Grace Canfield. And she was also a poet, so she was a very interesting speaker, I'm sure. In addition to those, there were workshop performances by the students at the workshop. So it was a very busy summer schedule. In fact, this is a flyer from the Surry Playhouse, the first year. It states at the top, professional players from New York and London theaters appearing at America's most unique repertory theater, Blue Hill Road near Ellsworth. And if you look really carefully at these lists, you can see on Monday, July 22nd, the production was The Rat Trap. On Tuesday, it was a different production, Captain Jinks of the Horse Marines. On Wednesday, it was The Rat Trap again. On Thursday, it was The Romantic Young Lady. On Friday, a different play, The Dover Road. On Saturday, The Dover Road and The Rat Trap. So you can see it was pretty grueling having different plays every day. Not only were there different plays every day, but this was an acting company. And that meant there were no specific stars in the company, that each person would play a role. And it so happened that apparently, during this first season, that if an actor played one role for one performance, the next performance of that play, they played a different role. Can you even imagine? Trying to figure out, first of all, which play you're in, and second, remember the lines. It would have been very difficult. This routine, this schedule, was only done that first season. After that, one play a week. I suppose you would recognize, most of you will recognize this fellow. He was perhaps one of the best-known actors that graced the stage of the Surry Playhouse when Leighton Rollins was director, Henry Fonda. Henry was listed as the scenic designer of the staff of the Surry Playhouse, and he had some roles in plays as well. Henry was well-liked in Surry, and Jane Smith recalled that her father, Richard McGraw, and my uncle Richard, said Henry played baseball with the locals. Henry also befriended Juanita Higgins, who sat on his knee when she was about 4 years old. He offered Juanita his dog when he left after one summer because he could not take it with him. But Juanita's parents said no, they already had a dog. We are very pleased that Juanita is here this evening, sitting here in the front row. We are very grateful that she has shared some of her stories through two taped interviews with the Surry Historical Society. Some of those excerpts are published in our newsletter, which you can find on the table in the back if you've not already received one. Henry was also a great artist. He created this awesome sketch of the Surry Playhouse. He also made sketches of some of the actors, and those portraits hung in the theater during these seasons. Another actress, or another local star actually, was Margaret Callahan. She summered here in Surry in what many of you might know as the Surry Inn, but some of us may remember it as the Callahan Place. As this article states, Margaret had been on stage with Stuart Walker's company in Cincinnati previously and joined the acting company of the Surry Playhouse, Inc. in the summer of 1932. We know that she was in the play Michael and Mary, in which Edith Barrett, Shepard Strudwick, and Henry Fonda also had roles. Margaret went on from the Surry Acting Company to make a few movies, and we hope to showcase some more of her glimpse of stardom at the local Yokel presentation. We have several playbills from the Surry Playhouse in the red notebook in the back. The majority were donated by Karen Blaisdell and Mike Coffin. If you peruse through some of those playbills that we have from the early years, you may find some other names that you would recognize as well. Two names that popped up to me were Maria Ouspenskaya, who was here in 1931. She became famous for the role of an old Romani fortune teller in The Wolfman in 1941. And Joseph Cotton, who joined the acting company in 1932. We have playbills from Marquise, Let Us Be Gay, and Grumpy to know that he played in several plays here as well. And of course he had film roles later on in Citizen Kane and The Third Man, just to name a couple of his many plays. Audrey. Well, these actors and actresses were here. They had to eat, didn't they? Tell us about where they went.
Okay. So, I referred a little bit before to the Blue Lantern. So, this is a photo of the Blue Lantern from many years ago. We can say what year. In front, here, we believe that is the sign, and on the sign would have been this design. So, So the Blue Lantern was established in 1921, so it was in existence before the Playhouse was built. It was located in front of the Playhouse and served food for the actors. We know from talking with Juanita Higgins that her mother waited tables there. Adelia Milliken, the grandmother to both Jane Smith and Bob Milliken, and Helen McGraw, Jane Smith's mother and Kathy's aunt, also worked here. This is the symbol used. The additional photo shows the cover of a map, and it was quite a huge map, and it was titled, "All Roads Lead to the Blue Lantern." Here we see two local men hanging in front of the Blue Lantern. They are Floyd Black, who was Janet Stanley's grandfather, and Raymond Cousins, who was the ground superintendent for the Playhouse. So, at the end of the 1933 season, Rollins announced that the Playhouse would close due to financial problems. Some sources state the reason was because Rollins had started a new summer theater that year in Bar Harbor, and also that this was the competition that caused the financial problems. We also believe that the Criterion Theater, which was built in 1932, most likely with its fancy Art Deco features and comfortable seats, would have had a great appeal to many performers and also to the theater goers. When the Playhouse closed, it was purchased by Mrs. William Green, and from that time on, or at least immediately, it remained empty. So Kathy, I wonder what happened to the Playhouse after Rollins and his actors left.
Well, rather than have the Playhouse stand empty, Mrs. Green permitted the Jacques Cartier Dancing School to use the Playhouse for its classes in 1935. In the meantime, in New York, a group of the former Surry Acting Company got together for rehearsals when they weren't busy working in hopes of establishing a permanent repertory theater in New York. The group obtained permission for the use of the Surry Theater in the summer of 1936 and worked for 2 months. They were very serious about and dedicated to honing their skills and worked continuously. There were no shows for the public in 1936. The new Surry Theater organization included a governing board consisting of actors and actresses that had been here in Surry. Catherine Emery, Shepard Strudwick, and Helen Wynne, who was Strudwick's wife, Anne Revere, and also the director, who was also Anne's husband, Sam Rosie. Due to public interest, the Surry Theater decided to put on 4 plays in August of 1937, with plans to present 2 of those back on Broadway. No short one-week rehearsals for this group. They insisted on month-long rehearsals for each play. So they started rehearsals back in New York in March. Also in August of 1937, Eleanor King, who was the choreographer for the Surry Theater, gave a recital in the Playhouse. So the public once again was treated to performances at the Surry Playhouse. In 1938, the Surry Theater again presented another 4 plays to the public. There was an article up from Surry, Maine, written by Henry Printer, that emphasized the very hectic schedule of these actors. And I'll read this part of this. Samuel Rosen, the director of Surry Players, turned out to be a czar. However, he is a young man in deadly earnest And herewith is a typical daily schedule of the Surry Players in Maine last summer. 8:30 a.m. arrives. 9 a.m. breakfast. 10 to 12:30 dancing or other calisthenics. 12:30 to 1 lunch. 1 to 5:30 rehearsal. 6:30 dinner. 7:30 until midnight or later rehearsal. So it didn't seem that they had much time for anything exciting. In addition to rehearsing and acting, they had to design scenery and costumes, and also they had to bustle around the Maine countryside in person and sell tickets. We have verification of that from our Dr. Clopper's diary, entry in July 14th of 1937. Well, his wife Grace. While Grace and I were sitting on a rock in our upper lawn waiting for Alma Hill House, a woman came up to us and introduced herself as Anne Revere, who is active in the Surry Theater. She sold us 2 tickets, season tickets, and in the course of conversation said that the former manager, Leighton Rollins, had carried off everything but the theater seats. He'd gone to Bar Harbor. In the evening, we rode with Alma to the Surry Grange Hall, and all of us sat there on baked beans, brown bread, hot rolls, salad, lemon pie, and coffee. Unfortunately, in 1939, the Grange burned. According to the Ellsworth American, it was caused by defective wiring. Although some of the furniture and regalia from the Grange was saved, the building that was built in 1844 as a Methodist church could not be saved. The insurance coverage was only $2,000. So, according to the Ellsworth American, the Surry Theater helped with the fundraiser. There had been a policy of this group of performers that they would give preview performances on Monday evenings to Grange members. This was part of its plan to make itself a theater for Maine residents as well as for some visitors. The benefit Grange night performances would be for all Hancock County Grangers, and these Grangers would get a discount admission price. Claude Bonzi, and those pictures used to be up there, but it's now replaced by Abraham Lincoln, I see. But Claude Bonzi and Mrs. Julia Nevels headed the benefit committee and ticketing. Finally, in 1939, the Surry Theater closed and remained closed during World War II. How did it reopen, Audrey?
So, when the Surry Playhouse reopened in 1946, after World War II had ended, its new director was Charles Carey. Carey had been involved in various roles in theater since 1928, and he served as a special service officer in the U.S. Army during World War II. Carey brought with him a group of actors from New York City, including Edward Everett Horton, Dennis Harrison, Barney Hughes, John Malcolm, and Mary Grace Canfield. Carey continued with the Surry Playhouse from 1946 until its closure in 1953. Shown in this photo are Charles Carey, first person I guess that's on the left, and John Malcolm on the right. This is a photo of Edward Everett Horton, who performed in many of the productions in the late 40s and the early 50s. He sure looks like a character to me. I think he must have been fun to watch. Okay. This is an aerial photo of the theater in the late 40s. Note the cemetery. Let me just... Okay, we'll go back to pointing. So the cemetery is right here, and we hadn't mentioned it, but Many of you may have noticed as you drive along Route 172, there is a sign that says the Playhouse. So that it goes up by the front of the cemetery, and it actually did lead up to the Playhouse at one time. So you can see this is where people would park. This is the Playhouse. Out here you can see there's a large field, and it's reported in what we researched that the people, the theater goers, could see. It had a nice view of the bay, which is hard for us to imagine now as there are many trees. So this is the Dow House, and again, we can't quite see, but in here would be the Blue Lantern. Okay. The field behind the Playhouse was a blueberry field. So I bet they had a few blueberries between, when they had a little break. Okay. I need to change my page. Sorry. This is a photo of the Blue Lantern restaurant. It was established, I think maybe I already read that one. Sorry, wrong slide. Okay, a quote from the 1950s playbill stated that the tea room, which proved so popular last year, has been enlarged by the addition of an attractive veranda. So it's kind of interesting because the veranda looks, like it was made sort of hastily, but they seem very proud of it. The restaurant is sometimes referred to as the Blue Lantern, or the Tea House, or the Theater Restaurant, but as we research, they really do appear to be the same establishment. This photo also shows the sign, so over on the far side, which we have a copy of, so if you take a peek at the back of the room, that sign is part of our display about the theater. And when you have a chance tonight, you should take a look around. There are photographs back there that were donated to us by Terry Huntley and her mother, Brenda Carter. Not Carter anymore. Brenda Thomas. Okay, so the restaurant is noted also as having home cooking and impromptu entertainment by the actors. So it sounds like it would have been a good place to spend an evening. Okay, here we have a menu from the Surry Playhouse Theater. And I know you can't read it, but you can tell that it really was quite an extensive menu. And I can let you know that a complete lobster salad dinner was offered for $2. So, you may recall that a few years ago we presented a program on the flood at the schoolhouse bridge. From that, a pamphlet was published called Survivors of the Schoolhouse Bridge. And this quote by Crystal Ally is taken from that publication. She, Naomi's mother, Naomi Ally, Crystal's mother, cooked fancy pastries for the Surry Playhouse. On many occasions, I would have to hold the mile-high meringue and chiffon pies. It was on one of those trips to deliver pies that I met Mary Martin, who took a liking to me. She was fun to play with, and later on, she became the real Peter Pan on Broadway. Kathy, will you tell us some more about the plays and productions during those years when Carrie was the director?
This is the outside of the Playhouse, obviously, in that little round circle around where the limousines would bring up the guests to the play, the entrance of the play. And maybe this is where the actors had a few minutes to spare to eat and have a chance to meet locals who needed to come to the Playhouse, such as Juanita's and Crystal's parents and others. The Dark of the Moon was one of the productions during this time period that holds special memories for Surry, as a few of the locals actually took part in this play. We know that Juanita's Higgins' dad, Llewellyn Smith, was in the production, and that Walter Norwick arranged the music and played the piano for this production. We also know that Wilbur Saunders sang in 3 of the plays, and I'm quite sure one was Dark of the Moon. We also have been told that Don Carter was in one of the plays that Wilbur Saunders was in, but have not been able to identify or verify which one it would have been. Nevertheless, it was fun for all of these locals. In 2018, Wilbur Saunders provided us a story in the local yokels presentation. His story was about his experiences performing at the Surry Playhouse. He said that they needed some singer from the community, so he signed on as a singer. In his first play, he sang a song called A Date with Judy to a girl named Judy. He went on to sing in 2 additional plays. And while at the Playhouse, he stated that he spent a lot of time observing how the players dressed, how they spoke, and how they behaved. He told the audience that in the back of the Playhouse there were dressing rooms, with the ladies on the left and the men on the right, and a long hall between them. He stated he didn't know the purpose of the hall, as people were in it frequently in all stages of dress and undress. He concluded his comments by saying, "It was quite an education for a boy from Cunningham Ridge." Note in this picture, there is a picture of Mary Grace Canfield, looking up here in the dressing room. She's also shown in this photo of a scene from the play, Light Up the Sky. This photograph was donated to us by Tom Tabor, who lives on the property that was the property of the Blue Lantern. And Grace Canfield is the person here on the far right. Again, Audrey mentioned that other photos were donated, and again, hanging up, the ones that were donated by Terry Huntley are surrounding that Surry Playhouse figure, so they've been framed and hanging on our Surry Playhouse wall. So we're always accepting donations for any memorabilia that you might have. This is another picture of Mary Grace Canfield on the left, and Charity Grace on the right, from her playbill of The Curious Savage by John Patrick, starring Charity Grace in 1952. Charity Grace was a character actress later in several TV shows such as The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, Dragnet, The George Burns Show, Father Knows Best, Make Room for Daddy, then The Real McCoys, and these took place in the 1950s and 60s. Grace Canfield was probably considered the favorite of all the actresses by the locals. She came to Surry from the start of 1946 and played in about 60 plays. She married the director Charles O. Carey in 1950. They had 2 daughters, Phoebe and Allison. The oldest, Phoebe, was a baby while they were in Surry. And like all parents, daycare was needed when both parents worked. And apparently, Rena Bonzi, school teacher and wife of Claude Bonzi, was just the person Phoebe needed. I'd like you to read a letter that Mary Grace wrote to Rena in 1953. sent November 8th, 1953. Dear Mrs. Bonzi, I've been meaning to write for some time now, but the day I got back to New York, I went into rehearsal for a Broadway show and have been working from morning until midnight. The show closed last Saturday after 15 performances, so now I'm back in a more normal and restful routine and have a chance to tell you how much I appreciate all you did for me last summer. I had so worried about taking Phoebe to Maine and having her live amid the confusion and untidiness, which is a trademark of summer theaters. I knew I wouldn't have the time or the energy to give her the proper care. I can't describe to you the joy and peace of mind it gave me to take her to your house and have her in your care, which impressed me as always being serene and loving. I felt so right about things when she was with you, and I know you made her happy by giving her what I couldn't give her. She still speaks of you and says she wants to go see Beanie. We still are uncertain of our plans for the next summer. About all we do know is that we will not be taking Bar Harbor again. The Surry Theater we'd like to hang on to if we can. Please give my kindest regards to Mr. Bonzi and to you both, my repeated thanks for the affection and good care you gave to my beloved Phoebe. Sincerely, Mary Grace Canfield. P.S. My love to Raymond Cousins when you see him. So there was hope that they would start again in the following summer. But all good things must come to an end. The Surry Theater closed for good after the 1953 season. In 1954, Gerald Davis purchased the Surry Playhouse, and in 1956, the building was torn down, and Kenneth Blaisdell used some of the boards to build a summer cottage in Beach Hill. The bell was hung in the cupola of the new barn that Gerald Davis constructed at his home named Deerfield in 1966. Mary Grace gave a talk to the Surry Historical Society when she was living in Sedgwick. She mentioned remembering living in the house next to the cemetery and asked who lived there now. And at the time, Ruth Davis answered, I do. However, now we don't know who Ruth Davis was. Was she related to Gerald Davis? Or which house might that have been, if it still is an existing house? Audrey and I have enjoyed trying to piece the puzzle of the Surry Playhouse together. But there are still questions such as these without answers. And I'm sure some of you have questions and answers, or recollections, or hearsay about the theater and the Blue Lantern. And we would love to ask you if you would like to share any of those memories or thoughts now. Thank you. Yes. I think if you would come up to the microphone, the court will only go so far.
Just have a question. Earlier in the discussion, you mentioned the Hammond. Is that a relative of the Hammond lumber people?
I do not know. I wondered that. I do not know if Mabel Hammond was related to the Hammond people. And for that matter, another question that I have related to that is, how did she own so much land? Constance Purdy and Mabel Hammond owned the land. It was said it was 375 acres that Constance Purdy owned. She was born in St. Louis. She was the daughter of a railroad engineer, Thomas Purdy, and Janet Campbell Purdy. Campbell's a Maine name, but I could not find any connection. So I do not know how they came to have property in Surry, or if Mabel Hammond was part of that Hammond Lumber Company, if they were originally, because she was born, I think, in Michigan. So they may have been several people here, but apparently not. And if anyone knows, we'd love to have answers to that. But yes, those are questions I had as well. I would love to know how Constance Purdy had that much property here and how I can understand how she wanted to start a summer theater, and she herself was an uncredited character player in many films as well later on in life. But yes, I don't know the answer, sorry. John?
I have one memory to share. My father, Ralph Curtis, and his brother-in-law, Red Stevens, used to box in an old barn at my house. And there was a punching bag hanging from the ceiling all during my childhood that was totally deflated, but it was still there. And when we had guests visiting, my father would take them on a tour through our barn and tell them that if they looked very closely, they would see Henry Fonda's fist print in the leather of the punching bag. Apparently he joined my uncle and my father for punching bag sessions.
Anyone else? Juanita, would you like to have anything to say?